Hi, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome you to our webinar today, From Silos to Synergy, Transforming Enrollment and the Student Experience Through Collaboration. We are excited to have you join us today for the webinar. My name is Bethany Moran. I am the Senior Vice President of Partnerships at EducationDynamics, and more importantly, I am your moderator today for the webinar. Before we get started, if we could go to the next slide, let's do a few housekeeping items. The presentation will be recorded. We will email you a link after the webinar, and the recording will be sent out in the coming day. I would also like to encourage you all to participate in the webinar. We want this to be interactive, so get your questions ready for Jodi and Gina. If we could go to the next slide, great, thank you. EducationDynamics is proud to be a part of shaping modern education because we know tomorrow's challenges will not be solved with yesterday's solutions. We understand in order to thrive in this market, you must focus on reputation and revenue. Building a strong brand and empowering growth at institutions is what we do through a proven strategic approach of research, strategy, action, and measurement to lead to continuous improvement in our work every day with our partners. Next slide, please. Great. And why do schools partner with us? It's because institutions get further, get faster with EDI. We have 35 years of experience creating graduates and breaking industry standards for growth. And the statistics speak for themselves. We've been successful at increasing brand visibility, applications, and enrollment growth while reducing cost per start. And we are proud to have helped generate 240,000 enrollments in the past 2 years with our partner institutions. Be sure to check out our entire Insights EDU Echo webinar series. We're covering a lot of great topics throughout our series, and so you can scan the QR code for more information. And now I would like to introduce our presenters, what everyone has been waiting for. Dr. Jodi Blinco, who is the Vice President for Enrollment Management Consulting at EducationDynamics and founder of the U School. And today we also have Gina Sen, Chief Operating Officer at Post University. So Jodi, I will let you take it away.
I have to turn myself off mute first. That would be helpful. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Bethany, for getting us started here. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us. I will set the tone up front. Gina and I really love to interact with you all, so hopefully this is going to be more of you providing your questions and your feedback than it is us talking at you for the next hour. I'm sure you all will appreciate that. But so this first slide that we have here, I do want to invite you all to drop in the chat or just unmute yourself and share some of your thoughts. As you know, we're here to talk about silos to synergy. And I'm sure you all can relate to silos that happen in your operation or at your institution. So the first thing we'd like to hear from you on is just where do those silos happen in the institution or in the operation? We'd love to hear more about why you think those silos are there and when they happen and how that impacts the student experience. So this is the portion where we want to hear from you. That will allow us to really customize and cater where we're going over the next hour with some of the information that we have to share. So tell us how silos impact your student experience, where they show up, why, when, and how. Don't be shy. Bethany, anything we have in the chat yet?
I'm seeing that I have a couple of comments about breakdowns in between the admissions and financial aid process and then the admissions and registration process.
Okay. So admissions and financial aid, admissions and registration.
And also, the student services team primarily sees their role as taking care of traditional campus-based students, and thus they don't always think about the online student and that population.
Okay. All right. Gina, I want to open it up to you just based off what you're hearing from the group so far. I know you have a lot of one, experience, and two, a lot of strategy that Post has been very successful with around these topics. So maybe just a high level based off what you're hearing and then where we're going to go with our conversation today.
Yes, thank you. And we will never get through that question without an admissions financial aid conflict. The enrollment process is the journey for the student, and it has to be extraordinary. And so if one element of that team is providing that extraordinary experience and they don't believe that another team member or full department is providing the same, it simply won't work. And I typically hear admissions marketing will start it off, and admissions financial aid, and maybe student success. And so there's all these elements of the student journey and these places that they need to go in order to get through that process. And so that entire team needs to consistently be on the same page. There needs to be an high level of collaboration and communication, and it has to have the same goal. And the same goal is for the student to get into their class without issue. And again, focusing on every touch point being above and beyond best in class. And so that's really the foundation to success. And so when we looked at a very siloed team at Post University, probably about a decade ago, we made a decision that said, let's invest in creating a one team concept. And so the enrollment team was formed, and it came with a lot of challenges, a lot of personalities, a lot of relationships that had to go from fractured to okay to we can work together to we want to work together. And so it's this element of growth. And the enrollment team at Post consists of admissions, financial aid, student accounts, advising, and of course, our marketing and academic teams. And then, of course, our compliance teams. So at some point, it turns into a university effort, all with the same mission, with the same goal. And so hopefully over the next hour or so, we can really tap into some of the real pain points and how we've had some success in overcoming some of those challenges.
Excellent, Gina. Yeah, we're going to get into some of the tactical pieces. I'm sure folks are curious of how do you bring this type of model to life, right? It's one thing to talk about it in theory and concept, but to actually accomplish it. And we're going to see the impact of when you all were going through some of these transitions and trying to break down these silos. What did that disconnect look like as it relates to the impact to enrollment, the student experience, but also what does it look like when you find alignment and you find that synergy? So we're going to get to that in detail, but let's spend a little bit more time and want to hear from you all around this common disconnect. And it is common, right? We all run into it. So to think that it's not real or it doesn't exist in all of our institutions, it's there. It's a challenge that we're all battling. And feel free to drop into the chat more of what are the specific examples that you experience in the day-to-day when you have this disconnect, when you have these silos happening across admissions, marketing, financial aid, operations, student affairs, student services. What happens when we have these departments maybe working on their own portion of the enrollment process or the student journey, and that lack of alignment? So Bethany, feel free to let us know if anybody's dropping any of those specifics in the chat there. But this is often what we see when we think about that disconnect. And Gina, I'll let you speak to this. I love this graphic because I think it does visually really show, when the silos are there, what happens, and more importantly, what happens to the student.
Absolutely. And this is a good image of the position we were in, let's say back in 2010 or 2012. And it was really self-centered. And that's why we have that big myself, me, myself, and I right in the middle, because everybody was there functioning for their individual piece of the student process. It was financial aid, it was admissions, it was really all about me. And so you looked at the finger pointing and this back and forth. Now, marketing would say, well, admissions just isn't converting the inquiries. And admissions would say, well, you're not giving us inquiries that are able to convert. And it's this real finger point that gets accomplished. Nothing gets accomplished. And so you can spend a lot of time and have a lot of distraction going back and forth with who's at fault or who should get credit for certain things. And then the same thing happens with admissions and financial aid. Admissions was in a position where they said, I'm not sending you my student because you're going to, quote, lose my student. I've given them this white glove, best in class service. I've built a phenomenal relationship with them, and I don't want you to mess it up. And financial aid would, of course, take that personally, and they would say, well, you're too urgent, you're too aggressive, you're too demanding. And so the relationships became incredibly fractured. And the same thing with advising. Advising would say, admissions, you're not giving us real students who want to be here. And so admissions would say, listen, we are providing every student an opportunity to get an education. And if you can't accept that, right? So there was this fundamental just arguing that kept occurring. And the funny thing is when we think about the hiring process and I look at the folks in admissions and who would apply and be hired to be successful in admissions, sometimes that's very different than who would apply and be hired and be successful in financial aid. So there is this human behavior element that we need to look at and we need to understand. So we've invested recently, I'm not sure if any of you have used an index called the predictive index. And there's one of many, there's so many tools out there, but this is a really simple, easy one that you can look at how you are and what that translates to the workplace. And so when I'm communicating with a financial aid advisor, say I'm in admissions, rather than just constantly bumping heads, we say, okay, let's just, maybe the PI is the foundation. Right. And let's look and say, well, your level of detail necessary is off the chart high. But I'm the type of worker that says, you know what, I can make very quick, swift decisions and I don't need all of the detail. And so you find this somewhat unique way to bridge the gaps and start communicating. And so that's kind of one of those next level hints. We didn't have these fun dynamic tools back in the day when there was all the finger pointing. So we had to really invest in the infrastructure. And I don't mean buildings. I mean people, process, technology, different creative ways to go to market, different creative ways to bring academics into the fold, one source of data, one source of truth, one system, right? So you start to add on all these key pieces that can support and build the overall mission. But the real true foundation is built with the people and ensuring that you're all on the same page.
And this next slide, Gina, shows that crazy funky circle where, I'm the one in the middle, and it shows it straightened out where really the student success and retaining that student and the focus is on the student. And now our departments and our teams are working together. I love this slide because it speaks to not only the qualitative, the student experience and the feeling and the human behavior that you were talking about, which I know you were talking about it more from an internal standpoint, but I think it's something to call out that human behavior and feelings show up just as much for the student, and they feel that crazy circle. They feel the tension. It
always
gets inflated. And
yes.
and so when it's a crazy circle, when we're disconnected, and when it's an aligned circle where they're at the center, they feel that either way, and the team feels that. And this line, this census, if you can speak to the impact when you eliminate this disconnect, you keep the student at the center, what happens?
Yes, it's such a great point because not only is it occurring amongst the folks, but the student, regardless of if you think or don't think that the student feels the impact, they absolutely do. And so you can see us trying to figure that out. We were in 5, 6, 7,000 students, and it really was the next iteration that says, how do we get all these things together, build that right foundation, and start to grow. And so you can absolutely see if you follow that line from the beginning, you go about 2 inches in and you see, boom, the moment when we figured out how to get this team functioning to a place that was ready for more. And you can't be ready for more until you have built that strong sense of camaraderie, culture amongst these teams. And so once we recognize that, okay, we're onto something here, now we have the ability to invest in some of those other tools, some of the systems, some of the technology, and some of those key things that are going to allow us to really take this to new heights. And so that's what the last 8 years has looked like, a real hockey stick opportunity for growth that we were only able to capture because this left circle here was built.
And Gina, if for those folks on in the webinar today who are listening and thinking, well, we might not get the investment to to invest in some of these tools or resources, what advice or suggestions would you have to help teams, help leaders help their teams at no cost start this process and to start to drive some of this work forward?
Right. And not everything has to have a dollar associated to it. It's nice to be able to have some add-ons with a little bit of expense, but the reality is everyone has a system. We don't function without it, whether we love our CRM or we hate it. There are so many key pieces that don't cost a ton of money, like texting systems and all of that. But truthfully, we just happened to invest in a new system because we were using one that was old, and I think my CEO and boss says it was around when Jesus was born, and it just didn't work. It didn't function. It didn't bring the collaboration together. Now, there are cheap, easy, free ways to do that outside of a large system investment. I guarantee most of your systems do that already anyway. It's 2025, not 2010. But had we not truthfully invested in the technology that we were able to, this result would have still occurred. And that's the value in bringing the teams together and collaborating. We still, to this day, do a lot of things outside of the system. And I know that's IT's worst nightmare, and it'd be awesome to get to a day where we have one system, one source of truth completely. But the truth is, a lot of the really detailed, our motto, and we hate to call it that because it's who we are, it's the fabric of our being, is post makes it personal. And it's a driving tenet to everything we do. And that personalized approach can't always happen inside of a really large enterprise system. And so you have to have some of these discussions and conversations and SharePoints and spreadsheets and one-on-one calls that are adding to that super personalized approach. And so that the advice really there is the collaboration amongst those teams in those circles is 90% of it.
Yeah.
The other tools are nice to have.
Right. And I love that you said to, hey, this trend line would have happened without this system investment that we made. And it would have happened because of the what you just mentioned, the collaboration and the work and the spreadsheets and the meetings and the one-on-ones. Can you go a little bit more in the weeds with that and maybe outline 4 or 5 recommendations or best practices that sound very tactical, but that's really where the magic happens, where, is it an every other week team meeting to start to, hash out some of the challenges? And especially, I think there's a little bit of a fear for teams, if you're already not playing nice in the sandbox together, the last thing they want to do is come together and have a meeting or have a conversation. So what are some of the 4 or 5 starting points? Is it every other week meetings? Is it listening to recorded calls together? What are we tracking on the spreadsheets that would be a good 30, 60, 90-day plan
Yes.
for institutions to start chipping away at this?
Yes. So the cadence of meetings is crucial. And we have something, we call it a DQL. And it comes from the hospitality industry. Our visionary CEO used to be in the luxury hotel business. And so he has this understanding of the best in class, true highest level of customer service. And it is a demand, it's a requirement, it is a non negotiable when it comes to any position, truthfully, across the university. But when we look here in terms of enrollment, it's that first introduction, and it is the most crucial. So the communication from the inquiry to getting into your very first class has to be just like you would expect when you walk into a luxury hotel. And so every single morning, these departments are collaborating on what it's called the daily quality lineup. And this is in the hotel business. This is when all of the workers would come together in all different functions of the hotel, and they would say, okay, Elton John's coming in today. He wants only brown M&Ms. He wants Diet Cokes in his fridge. He needs 57 ice cubes. I'm being dramatic, but everyone has their requirements. And when you have this team looking to provide that highest level of service, it's a daily quality lineup. And it's not just that one time per day. It is a constant communication throughout the day. And those levels have to be open. Now, someone would say, well, gosh, how do you get anything done? I can't constantly be communicating or getting chats. And we've navigated through a lot of that, especially with admissions and financial aid. Financial aid would be spending their entire day just fielding chats from admissions. What is going on with this student? My student just did the FAFSA. Can you check on it? Right? And so we had to really get better with the cadence of what that communication looked like. How can the managers support that? Maybe the meeting midday is with the team leads and the assistant directors, just to check and see if there's any hiccups throughout the day. Of course, then there's a cadence of a weekly meeting, setting up the week on a Monday afternoon, checking progress on a Thursday, making sure there's a game plan for the weekend. We have been listening to our calls for as long as we've had the recording option, so many, many years. We have recently, over the last 3 years, engaged in a company who provides feedback on those listening. So every manager and every team across enrollment has an obligation to listen to a number of calls per week, provide feedback, get with the training team, and make sure if there's an issue, whether it's compliance, customer service, incorrect information, we have to be very careful on those calls. Then there will be a training plan. And it's a documented training plan, not a punitive document, you did something wrong, but okay, we have a lot of opportunity to engage in a higher level call. Here's the areas of emphasis. We're going to check again in a month and look at that progress, or look and see if we're still doing the same things. Now, the company we engage with, they're based in India. They have recently, I had a call with them a couple of weeks ago. It's probably one of my favorite calls in my career. And he said, when we talk about best-in-class customer service, we are using your advising team, and admissions is right there, but your advising team as the gold star. It is the standard for what we're going to teach all of our other clients and how to truly support a customer, truly support a student.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So can you pull back the curtain a little bit and give us some of their feedback on why?
I'll give a great example. A student will call admissions and say, I really want to get into your grad certificate on teaching English as a second language. And admissions will go through that journey and say, okay, well, what are you looking to do with this? What is your end goal? What do you want to, after graduation, get into? Do you have, right? They're going to go through this entire discovery on what the student's real needs are. Now, there are some admissions departments or A lot of things are becoming AI generated or automated. It scares me to death. But that would say, okay, great. Here's the application, send it in. We'll go ahead and get you in class. Right? But sometimes some of these certificates, especially when there is an accreditation piece or they're looking for licensure, we have a large nursing school. We have to make sure we are setting the student up for success and exactly what they need. And so while we might not be the right choice or the right option, might not be the best interest of the student, we're going to take them through that journey anyway and invest in that time and invest in that experience, regardless if they're going to be a student or not. It's tough to find an admissions advisor who will invest 45 minutes into discovering that, this isn't the right program, but let's go and look online and see if there are some programs out there. And at least you have a starting point. We don't have any affiliation with a different school, but I just really want to make sure you get to your goals. And then that experience turns into, gosh, call post-university. It turns into a positive review. It turns into a brand awareness that's free, that goes a really long way when people start engaging about the experience they had.
I think we all know that the word of mouth or referrals take higher education out of the equation. Us as human beings, if we are told about a service or a product or a place through someone that we know and trust, and they had this fantastic experience, we are more likely to act on that because it's coming from a trusted source. And I think, Gina, that feedback of or that approach of the experience matters. We're going to have this conversation with you. We want to understand what your goals are, how we can help. Can we support you, or should we be having a different conversation and maybe looking at a different institution because that's what's in the best interest of the student? And that goes back to what you were saying earlier of feelings matter, and the feelings of the student and the experience of the student matters all the way through, not just in the admissions conversation, but through every department that they're interacting with. And so it's not just about getting that student enrolled, but obviously taking them all the way through to graduation. And if our teams understand they're going through is it the DQL you said, daily quality?
Yeah. Lineup. Yeah.
Yeah, lineup. And I love the Elton John example. Even if you were making it up along the way, the brown M&Ms and the Diet Coke and the 57 ice cubes, it really paints this picture of this. I want to know about you and what you need and what's important to you. And my job is to offer that service and that experience.
Yes.
So I want to pause for a moment. Bethany, any additional comments or questions in the chat?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a call to action for those of you who are here. Bring us more in the chat. Bring us your questions. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, Gina, and I know has been a really, you all do really well from a daily practice standpoint, is you mentioned Excel spreadsheets and reports. We have on here as our recommendation number 2, that really looking at data is an important part of this process. And I think sometimes people have different reactions when they hear data. They either think of it as a really negative experience from their own experiences with data, or maybe they're not sure of how to use it or how to integrate it into their operation. So can you share a little bit with us around how you all really tactically use data in your different departments and how you feel like that has impacted the student experience and breaking down these silos?
Yes. So I will say throughout any department, when you get to a place where the data is driving the discussion, you're in a very healthy place. And it's a time when all of that finger pointing goes completely away, and you take away the subjectivity, and you really truly, so many times I've been in discussions that are just getting focused on the wrong things and a little bit of the finger pointing, right? It never goes away. One other thing too, it never goes away. There's no moment where we get to the top of the mountain and say, we've made it. We've got the team and the things in place. It's constantly evolving and changing. And so it's a very, very long journey that never ends. And rather than making that seem daunting or exhausting, it should be exciting. And so I've gotten on a call and I said, okay, hold on a second. Let's just let me just pull some stuff up. And I'll sit there and I'll say, okay, so we had 7,000 applications. We converted at this. Last term, we had 6,000. We converted at this. There's a gap here, right? We're not getting those FAFSAs completed. Let's think about why. And sometimes when you do that, the whole conversation changes because we were talking about something that wasn't actually the right picture. It was we expected something that was occurring. And when we looked at the data, it shifted everything. Okay, that's actually not the issue. This is really, and you start looking at how you can make adjustments and make change without it being personal and without it being about someone or something. So the other piece to that that's crucial to have success is the integrity of the data. Because how many times do you show up on a call and the first thing, oh, that's not right.
Yeah.
That can't be right. Right. And then there's 20 minutes of just talking about how that's not right. The data's not going to work. You know, who did this, who pulled this, who filtered this. Right. So there's getting to a place where you can eliminate that and really truly trust in the numbers and let the information drive all of those discussions. And so it's, again, just a dedication to something outside of ourselves. And that gets the result.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. And I really appreciate too what you said in the beginning of the data helps to, sometimes it can trigger emotion, but I would say all in all, it can remove that emotion because there is a center point that everybody is focused on. And as you said, really looking to solve, that is the problem we are looking to solve. The finger pointing still is likely going to be there, but that is no longer the focus of the discussion. The discussion gets centered around the storyline in the data and what actions can we take to solve for the gap that we have collectively identified. And you mentioned when we were looking at the last slide that the cadence of meetings is really critical in this process. So how often are we looking at data, just teams in general, whether it's enrollment or marketing, financial aid? How often are we looking at data and how far down do we drill with data? Are we taking it to the advisor level or the counselor level?
Yes. For example, every admissions advisor has their midterm and end of term reviews, but they have those old school term KPIs that they understand. And it's never about the number of starts. It's always about the efficiencies of the process and the behaviors that go into them. We don't do merit or reviews on numbers. We do merit and reviews on behaviors and values. And that might sound like this crazy concept, but when we look at those midterm assessments, it's a massive percentage of the highest level of customer service. And are we filling that? And that's through the calls and the looking through training lens and the engaged with the global team that we have listening. And then we're saying, okay, we got X amount of inquiries and we got X amount of applications. Well, the expected KPI is X and you're here. And if it's above, great. What are you doing to be above? Right? There's this inquisition, whether it's good or bad, because we want to expand that and share that. And if it's low, then we're going to do a little bit more listening and we're going to figure out where in that, we call it a professional college advisory session. It's incredibly long, acronym for everything. We call it a PCAS, but in reality, that's that interview. It's the discovery of the student. And so where are we missing the opportunity to have a higher level, better conversation? And so then we look at application to method of payment complete. How have we taken that exciting discussion about our future and education and incorporated how we're going to pay for it and the financial piece? And making sure students understand all of their options when it comes to that. And that's one of those
Absolutely.
other gold standards with the financial aid team and the finance team that we say, okay, well, if this financial plan isn't working for you, how do we discover alternatives? And how do we look at different scholarships and invest in ways to get to a place where this is making sense for your wallet? And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of really awesome, we could spend an hour on that, but there are things outside of federal financial aid and cash that can really support a student in feeling like they can better afford an education and be debt free when this is over. And
Can
so,
we
yeah,
go ahead?
please.
I'm sorry. I was
No,
going to say, I have two follow-up questions to what you just shared, and then we'll move to the next slide. But one is related back to the data question. The other is a follow-up to what you mentioned about looking at data and then connecting that to the behaviors, which I love that post believes in that and executes that with every department and executes it really well. It's humane for the employee. It's also we've already seen the impact to the student experience and how it can impact conversion and enrollment. But my question more specifically is, I know when we presented this in New Orleans, we talked a lot about the step conversions or the funnel and how you all break that down. And so maybe sharing a little bit about that and what do you look for? How do you get from conversion to coaching to behaviors? What are some tips and tricks that you can share with if you see a breakdown here, what
right.
are we connecting that to and then coaching the behavior?
Right. And so each of them, so when we look at inquiry to start, we break that down 5 other ways. So kind of like how I was going through admissions, and we do the same thing with advising, and advising will have their persistency and retention metrics by student, by term. But sticking with admissions, inquiry to application. Application, you can get that at any time, but our application has to come with a very detailed conversation. And again, like I said earlier, we call that PCAS. So you have this inquiry, you have an application conversion, you have a conversion to that discussion, that PCAS. Then we have to figure out the financing. So there's that gap between, okay, I'm excited about school, I've had the conversation, I've done the app. Am I taking that next step to either complete a FAFSA or have a cash payment plan conversation? From there, we are going to get registered in school. From registered in school, we're going to actually start and engage in our first course. And so each of those areas has on our training team is fantastic, but there's those top reasons for each one and how we could be better coached on improvement. And so if we're looking at the very top of the funnel, inquiry to application, we're just not getting those applications. What are our calling behaviors? How many discussions are we having a day? Is it a lack of effort? And we've kind of flipped our whole calling around. We have the 5-9 system. So I'll go back to the days when we used to make outbound calls and, there was a goal for that and an expectation for that. Texting, texting is a major form of feeding that discussion. And so what are our text messages like? Are we hesitating before responding to texts? Nowadays, we call it, are you on ready? Are you at your desk available to engage with those calls? Are you missing calls? Are you dropping calls? What does the first 10 seconds of your conversation sound like?
Yeah.
Is now a good time to talk? Are you very just passive in your level of excitement? Are you, right? So there's just in each conversion, we'll have all of those key areas. And sometimes it's the littlest tweak.
Mm-hmm.
I go back, Jen Zanuski, she's our vice president of operations. She's absolutely amazing. She struggled in admissions for a minute. And I said, you say a couple words too many times. You're missing the kind of the closing statements. We spent 5 minutes. She was the top performing admissions advisor. All of her files were complete. It was incredible. Just the teeniest little tweak sometimes can take an advisor to a whole nother level and it builds their confidence.
100%. Go ahead, Bethany.
We do have a question. You're talking
Okay.
about, yeah, we're talking about the training, Gina. Like, is it weekly, daily? It sounds like it's constantly ongoing, but do you have time set aside in the day or the week or the month dedicated to training, or how's that feedback loop work?
So it's a very, again, I say this a lot because it's really who we are. It's an individualized approach. So once we get through onboarding training, we have an entire onboarding 5-week, very detailed way to get folks ready. But after that, it's constant. And sometimes it's, hey, I need some help with this. I'm really struggling in this area. It's proactive on the advisor side. Sometimes the manager, it's this constant, we call it a mutual commitment to success. And those are the monthly and bi-monthly, and those are those discussions. And it's me as the manager saying, all right, Jodi, we're struggling in a couple areas. Let's figure this out. My commitment to you is that I'm going to listen to 7 calls this week. Your commitment to me is progression for each one. So when I listen, we'll come. I want you to listen to your calls. You know what? I think send yourself 3 voicemails. Change your tone, change your level of excitement, hear your own voice, have some feedback, write a little paragraph about what you think you want to tweak and change, and let's connect on Thursday. And so it's this discussion of, I'm committed to your success. I just need to know you're committed to your success as well. And now we're good. We've got this win-win agreement, this mutual commitment, and we're going to improve these metrics by X by X.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversation happens across the department. I've been here 7 years. I've been here 6 months. And then we lean in on our learning and development team that says, hey, I'm managing 14 people, but could you please spend 15 minutes with Jodi on this area? Just want to role play with her, call her over the phone, look at her body language on camera, just see what things we can do to make her a little bit more comfortable on the phone.
Are you giving me a coded message, Gina? I need to adjust my body language on camera.
Never. No, but sometimes that's the little tweak. If you're sitting like this and your jaw's clenched and your shoulders are up and you're nervous and you're reading, and when I did admissions and advising, sometimes my feet were up. Sometimes I had the headset on and I was leaned back and having a fidget in my hand or whatever, and so you have to lean into what makes you feel the most comfortable. And nowadays, everybody's in that comfort of their own home, but is that a good thing? Is that a distraction? Do you have a quiet space? So finding out what little things you can do to just make it easier, make it more fun.
And I'm going to call out a correlation. You talked earlier about post makes it personal and that connection to the student experience, but everything that you're sharing now highlights the other angle of post making it personal for the employee experience. And that investment in the employee is, I think it's oftentimes overlooked. And it's an assumption that employees, once they're hired, just go figure it out and sink or swim, or, listen to your peers. And that's the level of training and investment. And if we think about that, again, from a human perspective, no one wants to come into their job every day and struggle or feel like they're not being successful. And the examples that you shared about you in that role and Gen Z and just the, Gen Z is a person, by the way, not Generation Z. Let me clarify that. But just, it really is, it can be the smallest tweaks. And we do that a lot through our coaching and development through the youth school programs. I know we had the opportunity to work with your whole financial aid team just around foundational skills of how do you interact with students. I know it sounds like the simplest things, but I remember in some of our coaching sessions, the implementation of having a mirror in front of them so they could see themselves while they were on the phone and how that shifted their tone, how they showed up, how they made the student feel was significant. And I think it's probably more common than we realize how much leaders or institutions can overlook the power of training and development for their people, for their teams. And really, it's, as you said, it's about being in the weeds in the day-to-day. It's heavy lifting, right? To plug in with your team every single day and listen to calls and have that mutual commitment to success, it's not easy, but it's absolutely worth it in the end, because you know what that means for your student experience. You also know what that means for the employee experience. And it's our last two bullet points here about, really empowering students and staff, creating that culture. And that's what you all have done through this whole process. It's not just a series of, these are the KPIs, these are the meetings, we do the DQL. It's an environment. It's a culture of coaching and development, and of this commitment to the mutual commitment to your success. And people feel that when it's there, and they feel it when it's not there. And that's probably one of the easiest ways to have a really impactful, have an impact on your student experience, is to make sure your employees know that you care and that you show up in that way for them every single day, so that they can feel confident, they can feel empowered.
Absolutely. That is our university strategic plan when it comes to the cultural initiative, is associates first. Now, that doesn't mean students aren't first. That doesn't mean the university isn't first. It means as long as our associates are appreciated, respected, they feel a sense of belonging, they feel like they are just enjoying what they do. We said it at the beginning of the call. Students we don't give them enough credit. They will sense that to the highest level, and it will absolutely impact the experience that they have. And so many times I listen to these calls that get sent to me as, the gold stars, and the students is just, it's how you make them feel, and they feel so appreciated. And associates who don't feel good about what they're doing, they're not having success, they're nervous and scared, and they don't feel like this is working for them, the students will not say, I feel so connected to this universe. It just won't happen. It's almost impossible. And so that's the importance of the overall success when it comes to no associate doesn't want to do well. They all want to do well. It's our job to commit mutually with them.
Absolutely. As a leader, it's your responsibility to connect with them and make sure that they have the tools and the resources and the coaching. And if you don't have that yourself, I think sometimes that's where that disconnect can be of, I don't know how to coach, or I'm not sure what that even looks like. So, there are some layers there, but for those of you on the call, if you have direct reports, which I'm sure most of you do, definitely part of the responsibility to make sure your people are taken care of in a way that has them feeling empowered and like they can be successful. Gina, I'm going to flip us to this next slide, because it really, the visual of the advising approach, I know that was a really hot topic when we presented face-to-face. So I want to give it its due, spotlight, I should say. So this is number 4 of our proactive student engagement, and I'll kick it over to you if you can kind of share what you all did here and the impact that it had.
Yes, and I spent a few days last week in the country of Chile, and our partnership and collaboration with UNAB, which is Universidad de Andrés Bello, and they too were absolutely show-stopping with this concept as well, and wanted to really engage in this. And so it's really a global interest in how can we advise our students in a way that is personal and isn't a kind of one size fits all for the student experience. And so when we look at the adult learner, and we do this on our traditional campus as well, but we look at that first term, we look at the first year, and we look at after that first year, so beyond that 24 credit mark. We made a decision and an investment a couple of years ago that said we need to reimagine the way we advise. And so the conversations that are coming from admissions into that first term, it needs to be, it's not really a handoff. It's more of this circular approach. And so we're not just handing the student to advising and saying, okay, here's your advisor, good luck. Admissions and advising need to really work collaboratively in that enrollment process to make sure there's no gap. You're not going to get this incredible experience in admissions with constant follow-up and constant emails and accessibility, and then go to advising and say, well, I can't get in touch with my advisor. And so we were noticing that that was happening. Admissions was just so urgent driven, and advising had 190 students or 250 students at the time. So how were they managing in that? So the financial investment came to decrease those caseloads. And so to give our first term advisors the opportunity to really improve their connection and how often they were engaging with students. And it's different conversations. That first term is crucial to success. And we see this as the persistency rates go through this channel here. First term is a lot lower than the first year, which is lower than the students who have engaged in 24 credits. So how can we support those needs, not only from an individual perspective, but when we get to that, we call it career and programmatic. How are we advising beyond the classroom? How are we advising for life after graduation? And how are we really engaging in the global workforce and the different dynamics where all of our students are living, what their goals are, how their goals have shifted and changed? Do they want that new job? Do they want the promotion? Are they in a career change? And what does that look like in the area of the country or internationally where they're located? And how can we help? So
I think it's calling out like the evolution of the student from 0 to 6, 6 to 24, and throughout, things can change in their life and on their journey. And if you're not there to help counsel and guide and steer, they may or may not persist. If there isn't an ability to make a financial investment in adding more resources at an institution, right, would your recommendation here be to maybe think about the human resources that you do have on your staff and where you could segment out different roles of the student journey? Or what would your thoughts be there?
Yeah, and the caseload sizes, while we invested in hiring a few more to it's still okay, because the real true element here, and the question I get all the time is, well, wait a minute, so they're changing advisors. And so I think we go back into the early days and we say, well, you're going to have this one advisor and they're going to be your advisor from day one through graduation. And there was so much value in that, and students love that. And what we found is that's great, but people leave, people get promoted, people move, people take on new roles and responsibilities. And so that one advisor for 4 years is highly unlikely. And that was going to change anyway. And so we always say students, not just students, but people don't mind negatives. They just don't like surprises. So as long as we build up what to expect from the very beginning, the structure of it, the changing of advisors is okay because it's expected. And so you build this really strong relationship with your first term advisor, and they're helping you manage your time and manage your days, but then you get to experience that again with your next iteration. And so they're growing in their educational journey as they take that next step. It's almost like a reward, like a badge. Well, you've graduated out of success in your first term, and now you're going to work with so-and-so. And so the likelihood of these folks being with them for that whole time is 100%. It's 90%.
I love how you framed it as, it's like you've graduated, you've moved on, you've elevated to the next part of your journey. And it is all about how you make that, how you present that, how you make that feel for the student. I want to call back out what you said, because that stuck with me. You said students don't mind negatives, but they don't like surprises.
Yes.
Yeah. And so setting those expectations along the way, whether we're talking about inquiry or graduation, making sure that your teams and your processes are set up as such that expectations can be set along the way, that we are communicating those things to the student proactively, so that they don't have those surprises.
Yes. And just that's again, it's that constant communication. I see this in my 11-year-old. He just wants to know how many more pages he has to read. It could be 3, it could be 300. It doesn't matter. I
Yeah.
just want to know, and I want to know what to expect. And a lot of us function that way. Some of
I was going
us,
to say, does it ever change? Whether you're
no,
11 or 50, does it
no,
change? I don't think it does. No. Yeah.
no.
Well, we are getting close to the end. I have some questions up on this slide for you to think about. As we've talked a lot today, we've talked a lot about the student's perspective and aligning your institution's values, your mission, your day-to-day practices, the data, your processes, your workflows. Where are there disconnects? And then what are your differentiators for success and creating that experience not only for your students but also your employees, which takes us all the way back to breaking down those silos and ultimately creating synergy. So Bethany, I want to turn it over. Any questions from the chat that we can answer in our last couple minutes here?
No questions at this time.
All right. Okay. Gina, anything that you would share as we wrap things up that maybe we didn't get to today?
Really, no. I think we could really talk about each of these areas. And I know you and I, we always find our way into the management of it all
Yeah.
because it's so important and it's so crucial. And regardless of whatever structure we have and the investments and whatever we make, it really does come down to the values and the mission. And as long as we call it the engines of success, it's that foundation. And if everyone is aligned and the mission is clear, and we know that it's never about us and it's always about the student and their journey, we'll never be wrong. And so I love how we can incorporate the data and take the subjectivity out of it, but that truly does provide the student the best opportunity to have success. And at the end of the day, that is why we are here.
Well said. I don't, that's where we need to end. There's nothing I'm going to say that's going to be better than that. So it's a beautiful wrap up. And I don't think we have any questions in the last 30 seconds or so. So I will end by saying thank you all for being here. Thank you again for taking the time. Bethany, anything that you want to share to bring us home?
No, thank you, Jodi. Thank you, Gina. This has been a great session. I could sit and listen all day. Takes me back to my days in the admissions office and trying to get everyone to collaborate. And it's a great story to tell. So I hope everyone's enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. We hope to see you again at a future Echo Insights Echo webinar. Hopefully I got that title right. If not, I'll be in trouble, but hopefully you'll join us again soon. And I'm sure will be receiving the recording here shortly. So feel free to pass that along to your friends. The more that we can share, the better. Thank you all. Take care and enjoy the rest of your week.
You too.
Bye, everyone.